Hi there. Today we're going to be talking about Minnesota child labor laws. And Minnesota has set forth some laws in regard to child labor, and what that means. A child is going to be anyone who is 18 years or younger. So also another word we could use would be minor. So when we talk about children, we're not talking about small children. We're just talking about anyone under 18. And labor laws, labor is another word for labor. A synonym would be work. So laws that are set in place in order to ensure the rights and make sure anyone under 18 is safe when they are working. So let's get started. Why is this important? Let's talk about that first. Just so you know, having a job early on in life is going to be a great benefit for you. Having the experience and getting some knowledge, meeting people, learning to work with people, learning what you're good at, it's all going to be really good for you. You also need to know that you have rights just like adults do, and you also need to be familiar with the laws that are in place in regard to Minnesota child labor. You need to know those laws so that you can follow the laws. You also need to know the laws so that you can make sure that your employer, your boss, is following the laws. So why don't we take a second here, go ahead and turn and talk. Talk to your neighbor about what is child labor, and then thinking about what we're going to be talking about today, try to take a guess. Think of one topic that we might cover and that Minnesota might cover under the child labor laws. Go ahead and turn and talk. All right, let's talk first about age restrictions. So there are some restrictions with age that Minnesota has set forth. Let's talk first about anyone who's under 14 years old. So people under 14 can have jobs, but the only jobs that they can have are listed on the screen. They can be a newspaper carrier, but you need to be at least 11 years old. They can work in agriculture. Agriculture, another way to think of that would just be farming. So you can work on a farm, do kind of the agricultural type of stuff. You can be an actor, an actress, or a model. You have seen, there's a picture on your screen, those cute little kids in a Target ad says $5 and $7. Those kids all get paid for what they do. They are working. Another job that kids who are 14 or under can have is a referee for a youth athletic program. So if you think about the city that you live in, there's going to be youth little kid athletics, like take soccer for example. Those boys on your screen you see, those are soccer referees, and they are getting paid to work, and they are definitely under 14. If you are working in agriculture or as a referee, you do need to have parent or guardian permission. And so back to those agriculture, you need to be at least 12 years old. And as a youth athletic referee, you need to be at least 11 years old. There's also, you need to be able to prove your age. So when you go apply for a job, they're going to ask you for proof of how old you are in order to get paid. So things that can prove your age to your employee would be a copy of your birth certificate. Your parent or guardian should have access to that. A copy of your driver's license if you have it. So if you're 14 or under, you're not going to have it. If you're 16 and under, you may not have it. But if you do have a driver's license, that'll prove your age. You can also use documentation from your school. And then also there's a form called an I-9. We'll talk more about that another time, but a copy of an I-9 would also prove your age. So thinking about the age restrictions that we talked about in the proof of age, I'm going to give you another turn to turn and talk with your neighbor. I want you to talk about who do you think you would need to talk to at our school to get documentation of age. So just kind of think about if you got a job and you were going to go in for your job and they wanted proof of how old you are and your only option was to get proof from our school, who would you go talk to at our school in order to help you with that? Then the other thing I want you to talk about is which proof of age listed above those four would you use to verify your age? Do you have a copy of any of those on hand? What would be easiest for you to use? Go ahead and turn and talk with your partner. All right, let's talk now about some time and hour restrictions. So you can't just work anytime for as long as your employer wants you to. There are rules in regard to how, when, and how long you can work. 16-year-olds, or I'm sorry, kids who are younger than 16, you may not work before 7 a.m. and you cannot work after 9 p.m. except as a newspaper carrier. We all know that those Newspapers are delivered really early in the morning, so if you're a newspaper carrier, you can work before 7 a.m. Those of you who are 16 and younger than 16, you cannot work more than 40 hours a week, and you cannot work more than 8 hours in a 24-hour period. And there's an exception to that, and that's agricultural operations. So farming, you may have to work more than 40 hours a week or more than 8 hours in a 24-hour period. And that's just because in Minnesota has strong farming, and when the laws were made, they knew that a lot of young children help out with family farms or might just work on a farm, and the hours on farms can be crazy. You also cannot work during school hours unless you are in a work-based learning program. All right, let's move on to the next slide. So there's also time and hour restrictions for 16 and 17-year-olds. They are less than the restrictions for kids that are younger than 16. But 16 and 17-year-olds cannot work past 11 p.m. on weeknights when they would go to school the next day. They also cannot work before 5 a.m. on weeknights as well. If their job, for whatever reason, might require them to work past 11 or before 5 for whatever reason, an extension can be made so they can work until 11:30, or they might be able to start work at 4:30, but they need to be able to have parent permission to do that. All right, so let's think about all the things we went over so far. So if you remember, we've talked about age restrictions, getting proof of age, and then time and hour restrictions. So we're going to go over a scenario right now, and what I'm going to have you do is practice. You're going to listen to the scenario. I'm going to read it for you, and I want you to try to determine if there's any laws being broken. So kind of think back about what we've talked about. After you've thought about it for a little bit, turn and talk to your partner and discuss your answers. See if you came up with the same answers. If you did, kind of talk about how you got there. If you didn't come up with the same answers, talk through that. All right, here's our first scenario. Maddie is in 7th grade. She lives with her parents and her 2 brothers on their family farm. She has always helped out with chores, but her dad increased her responsibility this year. He assigned her more chores and is now paying her for the work she does. Maddie wakes up and feeds the cows every morning at 5 a.m. She is also responsible for grooming all of the horses, feeding the pigs, and putting hay down in the horse barn. Go ahead, determine if there's any laws broken, and turn and talk to your partner and discuss your answers. So thinking about this scenario, Maddie is in 7th grade. So if you kind of do the math with that, just so you know, kindergartners, you start kindergarten when you're 5, maybe 6. But so working up to 7th grade, that would mean that Maddie is 12 or 13 years old. So she's under 14. So she can work on a farm if you're under 14. So there's no law being broken there. The other thing that stuck out is that she wakes up really early to feed the cows, 5 a.m. And if you are less than 16 years old, if you remember, you can't work before 7 a.m. unless it's in agricultural operations. So there are not any laws being broken right here. Good job. Let's do one more scenario. Again, you're going to practice, listen to it, I'll read it, determine if there's any laws being broken, and then go ahead and turn and talk with your partner again. So here's our second scenario. Raul is in 10th grade. He recently got a new job at Subway and loves it. He works 2 to 3 days after school for 4 hours. His manager sees that he's working hard and wants to give him more responsibility, so he offers to let Raul close the store on Tuesday nights with another employee. This means that Raul and the other employee will clean the store, put everything away, and once the store closes at 11 p.m., they'll have to count the money. Go ahead and turn and talk, think about it. So thinking about this scenario, Raul's in 10th grade, so that means that he is 15 or 16 years old. All right. So he really does need to be 16 if he wants to close that store. Looking at how much he works, 2 to 3 days, 4 hours a time, that's totally fine. But now that Raul's manager wants him to close the store, technically, if he's 16, he can't work past 11 on a weeknight, all right? But if the store closes at 11 and then they just have to count the money, hopefully he would have to talk to his manager, but they could probably be done by 11:30, and if he got parent permission, he would be able to swing that job. A couple more slides before we end up here. All right, let's talk about jobs that are prohibited for minors. Prohibited means no way, no how, no matter what. You cannot, if you are under 18, if you're a minor, you cannot perform these jobs. So minors cannot serve liquor. Minors cannot work with hazardous materials like explosives. You guys also are restricted from driving any vehicles or operating power-driven machinery, and that goes along with the last one, which is working on or around construction sites. All of these are put in place because those are just dangerous. They can be really dangerous circumstances and situations, and just it's for the protection of a minor that you guys cannot hold any of those types of jobs. All right, lastly, let's review. Here's what I'm going to have you do. On a piece of paper, I'd like for you to write down one thing you remember from each of the 5 topics below. We'll go over those. After you've written down one thing from each of the 5 topics, hand your paper in to me and make sure your name is on it. So today we covered various topics about Minnesota child labor laws. Minnesota child labor, remember, are going to be laws for anyone who is 18 and younger. So the first topic we covered were age restrictions. Second thing was the proof of age. Third were time and hour restrictions for kiddos who are 16 years old or under. We also talked about the fourth one, time and hour restrictions for 16 and 17-year-olds. And lastly, just a second ago, we talked about which jobs can minors not hold no matter what. So go ahead, write all those things down, review for yourself, and I'll take them when you're done.